What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined by my co-host Dave Martin, Swagger Dave. How you doing this week, man?
Doing all right. Doing all right. Law and Order, man, taking over.
Yeah, Law and Order indeed. Uh, it's been a interesting week since we last recorded. I guess only 6 days, but it feels like a week in a lot of ways. But um, it feels a little different today and over the last week, so it's not a bad thing. I do think we have a pretty good show today. We're going to be talking about an album that it was pretty fun to listen to, a couple of shows. We're going to be talking about a movie that surprised me in a lot of ways. But we do have a sad place to start today, which is we've had a lot of people, a lot of big stars in media passing away recently. Alex Trebek just the other day, game show host of Jeopardy, legend in every form of the word, passed away. I believe he was 80, 70,
Something
something
like
along.
that, yeah.
Yeah. And Sean Connery passed away at 90. Old. And unfortunately, King Von, an up and coming rapper, also passed away tragically. Why don't we start with him? Tell me about King Von.
Yeah, Chicago drill artist. He's having a big 2020. Had just released his second project of the year just a week or so ago and was shot and killed in Atlanta. And that's just sad. You saw the outpouring from fellow Chicago stars like Chance and G Herbo and Lil Durk, etc. Yeah, I mean, he was kind of really rocketing up. I think he would have been a pretty safe pick for XXL in 2021, and just had brought that technical ability to those drill sensibilities that you expect from rappers in Chicago. And he had a lot of hot songs already, and seemed to really be popular in social media. Seemed to be a really big rise kind of quickly. Like I remember seeing that second project I just dropped. I was like, wow, he's really working. This is really happening. And then just allegedly may have been some beef involved, and either way, gunned down. And obviously, you hate to see that violence in hip hop. It always seems to stick around, unfortunately. But another tough loss.
Yeah, for sure. It feels like we're eulogizing and talking about these tragic deaths way too often, especially over the last couple of years. Um, to shift a little bit to the other two people we mentioned, a lot of people have pointed this out. Obviously, the famous Jeopardy sketch on SNL where Alex Trebek and played by Will Ferrell, and Sean Connery, played by was it Daryl Hammond? Hammond, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
Uh, but where they kind of went back and forth and had this funny rapport. Uh, in a sense, both of these people, Alex Trebek and Sean Connery, really thrived and their star really rose because they were so genuinely themselves and had such like their own unique swagger that like nobody else really could compare to their their level of I don't know, personality. Sean Connery, I think especially, is known for having that immaculate swagger where every role just became Sean Connery, really, but you still just like dug it because it was Sean Connery being ridiculous a lot of time. What are your thoughts on Connery's passing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, very old. Can't be too sad about it. He was retired already. But um, obviously a Titan. I think his
Mm-hmm.
work as James Bond is really my first foray into acting that was very clearly before my time. Like he was not like the best of his era. People would point to like Cary Grant and stuff, but like he was really the first person I became aware of. I think as his turn many of the Bonds. Of course, I think my favorite Bond's probably Goldfinger. And he's it's just kind of classic swagger and charisma. And if you look back on his Bond roles, a lot of times he's actually a really big asshole too. It's kind of a funny performance. And then obviously you think to the more relatively recent stuff, which was old period Connery, where he was as an older actor, like Last Crusade and uh, Untouchables and such, and obviously just a really mammoth career. I didn't know he was offered Gandalf until people had said that when he was passed. That's kind of a wild thing to consider. But yeah, just a legend, like everyone knows at this point.
Yeah, and I think Connery, it obviously goes back to Bond, but Untouchables, playing Indy's dad in Indiana Jones, like people who, even though he wasn't working in the last however many years, just still everybody knew him, like you said, a Titan. So definitely a huge loss. And Alex Trebek, in the same way, transcended his sphere by being this, game show host who was a generational steadfast of early evening game show TV, and unflappable. He made learning cool. He never stopped being himself, and that created a lot of hilarious moments on Jeopardy. It's hard because I think he's such a, even beyond Connery, such a part of the American experience. If you watch TV and have any interest in game shows, you've at least watched one episode of Jeopardy. So feels like everybody kind of knew him, but he also seemed to go out in a really cool way, which he wrote. There was a book about him a couple of years back, and he said he wanted to spend his last days swing on his porch with his wife, and that's exactly what he did. So in every sense, good for him. Obviously, not losing, but succumbing to cancer after quite a public battle with it. Yeah. Any thoughts on Trebek before we move into what we got this week?
I mean, I don't have anything to add that hasn't been said at this point, but I mean, as the viral tweet suggested, it is funny to reflect on how he would just kind of dunk on people on Jeopardy from time to time and make fun of, the certain mindset and character you need to have to rise the ranks to be on Jeopardy with Alex Trebek. So he, like you said, he always stuck to what he was, and I think being a genuine game host is a big part of being a successful one, and he's kind of the first thing anyone would think of at this point.
Why don't we jump now to maybe something a little more upbeat for the listeners, and that's Little Mix's sixth album, Confetti, the British girl group coming off of their star turn on 2011's X Factor. Dave, how big of a Little Mix fan would you say that you are?
I wouldn't say I'm a big fan. We talked about their last album, LM5, about 2 years ago, 2018, and I was quite underwhelmed by that one. Coming in, I think really disliked their hits, like Black Magic and Shout Out to My Ex. Some really big songs, some really good songs, but songs that are a little old at this point. And kind of seeing them as an American in the shadow of Fifth Harmony as like the British version of that, sans one member. I was like, LM5, I don't think there was much on this. And you look back on the track list, there's a Nicki feature. You're like, it seems like this was kind of a play to American audiences, I guess. Which is funny because right before that album comes out, they leave Simon Cowell's label, even though that album technically was still out on Simon Cowell's label. This is the first album from them independent of that with RCA Records. And I feel like I'm of two minds because you could think about the album in a lot of ways, but I think when they're right, they make really good pop music. And, really good pop music and often can be simple, but when it's good, it's good. So, I haven't listened to a lot of their first few albums too much, but I mean, are you consider yourself much of a fan?
No, not really. I actually kind of forgot that we reviewed LM5. When I started looking through the track list earlier, I was like, oh, I remember this song or that song, but not a group that's really in my consciousness. And it's interesting to come into this album, Confetti, with very much little to no expectations for them, because I thought there was a lot to like on here, and I actually found this to be a pretty fun album to listen to. I think probably about like 6 or 7 of the tracks I thought were really solid. Maybe, 4 to 5 of them I could have done without, but that's much better than I was expecting going into this. How are you feeling after working your way through Confetti?
Yeah, same way. I think they just had a lot more songs that just hit. Like they had some bangers on Confetti, and they didn't really have any bangers for me on LM5. So, I am pro banger. This was good. This is a good development.
It's funny, and I don't mean to bring in last week's topics to kind of frame this, but we talked about Ariana and how Positions was pretty underwhelming, and I felt like this was almost more of an Ariana album than Positions was,
Oh, I
at
had the
least in
same
terms of
thought.
expectation. You did.
I had the same thought. When I'm listening to some of these big hits like Confetti, the title track, Happiness, I'm
Mhm,
like, oh wow, yeah, there's nothing as big as this on Ariana's Positions by design from
mhm.
Ari's, doing. But still, I was like, this is hitting more in the way I hoped Ari was going to hit for me just a week prior. So, yeah, I definitely made the connection.
Yeah, and it feels like some of those tracks like Confetti, um, even like Happiness, is like are there those are tracks that you almost can like hear Ariana just like soaring off of. And then
Sure.
obviously I think Little Mix still gives a great vocal performance. And some of these I think tracks were purely just to be like a vocal show off for them in some sense. But yeah, I definitely found myself enjoying this, I think, a little bit more than Positions in a lot of ways. Not that Positions was bad. We went over that. Check out the review. But you mentioned Confetti. Production on that was just amazing. I didn't look up who the producer was. Did you write that down?
I did not either. I quickly looked at the production. I didn't recognize too many of the names, but yeah, those drums on Confetti for
Yeah.
the hook, those kick right to my soul, man. That's
um, you mentioned what was the other track that you mentioned at the top
Happiness,
there?
the one
Was it?
right after.
Yes, Happiness. Those
Kind of
two
more
tracks
like a
back to back.
Euro pop song sound.
Yep, totally. And that the chorus, the hook on that is just really really good. Um, what about Gloves Up?
Yeah. So,
You like that track?
well, I think it's funny because if you look at you listen to this album, right after Happiness comes Not a Pop Song, where they're espousing all these lyrics about how now that they're well, what was the quote? I don't want to do what Simon says. I think that was one of the lines. It's like they're
Yep.
clearly doing their own thing now. That we're not going to do one of these traditional love songs about boys, blah blah blah. Yet most of the album is
Is that?
conventional pop fodder. It's traditional. They're not actually reinventing the wheel, despite what they might have been telling you they were doing. And again, it's not a bad thing, but it's just kind of funny to hear that. I think the back half of this kind of tailed off for me, including gloves up, because I think that the beginning is like just really high energy bangers, and it slows down a little bit. But um, like I like Not a Pop Song, but like gloves up and like breathe, like it's all right. Like I think in those moments, I stick to like the harmonizing of the
Mhm.
quartet more than anything else. But when it's a little slower tempo, I'm not as interested.
Yeah, I think a lot of that second half, like Gloves Up, My Love Won't Let You Down, those actually feel like you mentioned, they aren't reinventing the wheel. Those songs feel super familiar because the reason I brought up Gloves Up is that feels almost like that song was meant for Sia, and then whoever wrote it was like, "Here, you guys can have this." Like,
Okay. Yeah.
and I think it still comes off really strong, but the beats, the general tone and just vibe of the song feel very Sia-ish. And then a song like My Love Won't Let You Down feels like that was almost intentionally put in for them to just like kind of show off their vocals, but there wasn't really much else there to the
Sure.
track. Um, though, one song I thought was pretty good in the second half was If You Want My Love. Something about that song just popped off. I think if there's one track off the second
Shout
half
out
that,
J Lo.
yeah, really sounds like,
I
yeah,
also thought I also thought a Rendezvous had a strong hook as well. In general,
yeah.
most of the hooks on this are really good, and I think that's the thing in pop music. Even if the lyrics aren't anything groundbreaking, if the hooks are tight, the production's tight, and this is coming from strong vocalists, you're just going to hit a lot of boxes and fire off some serotonin. So, um, again, like I don't know if they, I don't know, I don't think they hit those ideals of changing who they are as artists. Maybe that'll come down the line as they get more comfortable in their new circumstances. But um, as far as big pop music goes in a mainstream way, there's a lot to like on this. And I was looking at this. I didn't realize that Blackpink, Jesus Christ, Little Mix, sorry, I didn't realize that Little Mix has sold 50 million records worldwide, which is the 8th most of all girl groups and the 2nd most in the UK behind the Spice Girls. Did not realize they're quite that scale because most of those sales are international because they're not a huge seller, in the States. Mm-hmm. But they definitely have quite the set of accolades already. 6 albums in.
For sure. And, I think the piece of this that really I wanted to ask you is, does this album being, I think, much more in our range of liking than LM5 shift your perspective on Little Mix at all? Does this up their status to you?
Well, yeah, now it changes my expectations because now I'm just going to expect more bangers moving forward. Like before it was like the bangers were more sprinkled, but this was high on bangers. So I'm going to need more of those on album 7. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, like I said, my expectations for Little Mix in this were very low and definitely raised the bar a bit. So I like that. And we'll be checking with them more. And also check out our Nowstalgia Best of 2020 playlist, which will have Little Mix as well as all the music that we've enjoyed this year. So Dave, we have a little breaking news coming in, but we're going to set the stage first, right? So Johnny Depp, very famous actor. You've probably seen him in some things. Pirates of the Caribbean, probably the main thing, but obviously going back a ways. And we've talked about him most recently in Fantastic Beasts, playing Grindelwald, very anticipated character for Harry Potter fans. And I think an interesting performance that wasn't loved by people. No. And if anyone that's followed Johnny Depp knows that he's also had some personal issues recently with fiance, partner Amber Heard.
Something like that, yeah.
Where they've been going through, I believe, civil suits. Trying to resolve
quite the complicated thing between him and Amber Heard. There's blame thrown at both parties. I think a thing to watch is, does Amber Heard actually stick with Aquaman 2? Like, because that's also Warner Brothers. Remains to be seen on that front. But either way, to me, Johnny Depp being asked to resign, as Johnny put it when he told us on Instagram.
Yes.
That's a positive to me because moral grounds aside, it was a bad performance and kind of distracting. like, do you remember at the end of the first one when Colin Farrell transformed into Johnny Depp? Very flat moment, right? Like, honestly, it would have been nice if we just kept Colin Farrell, if you ask me. But it seems that's no longer in the cards either.
Yeah, very underwhelming performance, especially for a character that was, like I mentioned, so anticipated. And now that he's been asked to step down or asked to resign by Warner Brothers, it's been reported, breaking news today, coming across Dave's desk just now, that Mads Mikkelsen is in early talks to replace him as Grindelwald. Dave, is this a good move by Warner Brothers? How do you feel about this potential move?
I mean, we like Mads Mikkelsen. He's a good actor. So I think it's a good pick. Sure. Apparently, it's David Yates' preferred choice. David Yates, of course, has been directing Harry Potter and Wizarding World films since I was like 10. It's very much his baby as much as J.K. Rowling's at this point. I think just about any good actor is an improvement over Depp because I just don't think Depp has been good for a while. Like the late period Pirates movies, the 4th and 5th ones are bad because his performance as Jack Sparrow just kind of devolved into being the jester buffoon. The cunning caricature. Early Jack Sparrow's completely gone. And I feel like that just kind of colors all of Depp's acting these days. And his Grindelwald performance was just strange, right? And I don't know how else to put it. It was just off and weird. And as you mentioned, the gravitas of a very famous, important character to the Potter lore was not being handled as well as it should have been due to Depp. So Mads Mikkelsen, I definitely think that's a character that has more grace. He probably will be able to carry more of that multi-layered gray nature of a character like Grindelwald, who has a really rich history, both on the very evil side, but also due to his relationship with Dumbledore earlier in the lore. Like there's a lot to explore if they choose to go for that, right? And I think he's at least up to the challenge, and I just haven't seen anything from Depp in the last almost 10 years to suggest he could have done that. So I'm for it.
The thing about this the coming movies in the Fantastic Beasts series is that it's obviously going to be very centered around Jude Law as Dumbledore and whoever is playing Grindelwald. And you need someone that can go toe to toe with Law, which I think Mads Mikkelsen can definitely do. I think he has more of the overall look that I kind of expected for someone like Grindelwald. But even beyond that, I think Grindelwald comes across as this like extremely charismatic, but also like composed and controlled character. And that almost feels exactly like what you think about with Mads Mikkelsen, where almost everything he's in, he's never like super loud or like bombastic or like jumping off the screen, but he has this quiet strength and like charisma to him that I think fits the role so well. So I really like this pick. I'm hoping that it follows through. I was actually thinking when I heard the news last week who I'd want to kind of step in. I didn't have anyone else come to mind. Did you have any? Yeah.
The only thing I thought of was Colin Farrell coming back. That's the only thing I'd
Right.
thought of. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Like you think about like what we know about Grindelwald as someone who was able to gain a lot of followers to some really evil shit, right? Mads Mikkelsen makes sense as the kind of salesman for that, right?
Yep.
Like the performance we got from Depp did not have a lot of nuance to it. So it was just more of a walk.
Yeah.
Hopefully, like you said, hopefully this sticks because there's a lot of potential with this one.
I hope it sticks. If let us know how you're feeling. Leave a comment below, or if you want someone else to replace Johnny Depp, comment that too. Let's move on to teachers having sex with underage people. Or are they?
18.
We're not sure. It's the new Hulu miniseries. I think it's Hulu and FX miniseries. A Teacher, which funny name. It's starring Kate Mara. We got Nick Robinson, who you would know from I, Simon or Love Simon. Love Simon,
as well as the older brother in Jurassic World.
Yeah, which it was funny because I kept being like, I've seen him in a movie though, and then I was like, oh yeah, there we go, Jurassic World. Anyways, this premiered on Hulu. They dropped the first 3 episodes today, day of recording, November 10th. I only got through about 1.5, so I'm not caught up on all 3. Did you get through all 3?
I've only seen the first.
So we're gonna kind of take this slow, and we know people may have seen more than we're going to be talking about. Still leave your thoughts. Let us know if our general take on the first episode fits for you. But I was left a little bit intrigued, but also a little bit underwhelmed by this first episode. Kate Mara, such an electric presence almost every time she's on screen, feels almost like a bit like dulled down here. And I also feel like just engaging with this type of material is tough stuff. Like it's hard because like at the same time, these are like beautiful people who are not, Nick Robinson, I believe, is in his mid-20s. Like he's not actually an underage person. But they're portraying this relationship, or this budding potential romantic sexual relationship that obviously is illegal and wrong. So it's I'm sure they'll be exploring this more, but I found it a little bit tough to kind of get into. How are you feeling after the first episode?
Yeah, definitely more wait and see for me. I have some reservations. I mean, it didn't come out of the blue. This show was created by Hannah Fidel, who directed a movie of the same name that premiered at Sundance back in 2013. And this is essentially a dramatization of that film on TV, like we want to see often in the era of peak TV. Yet, when I realized it was 10 episodes, I was like, that's a lot. That's a lot
Mhm.
for this, even if they're only half-hour episodes. It feels like this could get thin quick. Having only seen one episode, I don't actually know that yet. But you think about what we saw in the first episode, right? Like, what kind of are you going to get sparks? I don't know if you want sparks. There's a warning about like the portrayal of grooming before the episode starts, right? Yeah, and like there's a hotline at the end. Like, it's not something you want to sensationalize, even if it is like salacious content. And I like if Kate Mara and Nick Robinson are really great in the show, it'll probably be enough for me. But like, I also kind of question like what you gain from having like adding more to this story, because like if it's well contained as a movie, do you really need to triple its length? Like what are you adding to it? Remains to be seen, obviously. But I mean, going in, I was like, okay, Mara hasn't been in my life in a while. Like I know
Mhm.
she was on Pose, but I don't watch that show. But other than that, it's kind of been a minute, ever since really being, a scene stealer in House of Cards so
Yep.
long ago at this point.
Yeah, it's funny when I think about her career and even her sister. I feel like the name, I think, for a lot of reasons outside of their acting ability, is well known. Coming from a famous family, and I feel like 10 years ago when House of Cards came out, maybe it was even longer, people were talking about this and talking about these two, and it's like these two are going to be the next like it girls of Hollywood. In a lot of ways, did not take over that sphere the way we kind of expected, but still, every time I feel like Kate Mara, Rooney Mara show up in a show, it's like or
Yeah,
uh,
anything.
film, you're just kind of like, damn, like they really capture your attention. I think there's a lot to like about the show, and just kind of seeing the the beginning of the second episode, it seems like there's potential in terms of what we talk about that story being thin, to like explore like the teenness of the show. I haven't seen the movie obviously, but to like explore those teen situations and have a bit of a teen show with this like overarching theme of this relationship, this
Right.
inappropriate relationship, which I think could maybe buoy a 10 episode season. But 10 episodes, especially for a mini series, a half hour mini series about a topic that, like you said, could maybe be done in like 4 to 5 episodes, is a little interesting. So I agree. I think that I'm eager to see how they kind of pull that off. Um, One thing I did want to say, just kind of a random, not really anything about the show. Good music choices. They start off with LCD sound system at the beginning, so obviously I liked that. And I
Very good
also
start.
felt, yeah, and I also felt like the uh, just the overall feeling. Like they were very self aware. There's a moment, I can't remember if it's at the beginning second episode. I think it's in the first, where one of the teenage boys is like talking about the other teenage boy's like little sister, and
Yeah,
he's
it's the
like, "Well,
first
you look
episode.
30." And I was like, "Yeah, that guy does look 30." I'm glad that they like called that out, because like that's one of those moments where like it's like Grease, where those people, the original actors are supposed to be playing 15 or 16-year-olds, and they're
Right.
45. But um, anything else you liked about the show or that you didn't like?
Uh, yeah. I mean, I definitely want to see more and see,
Mhm.
because like I think in this first episode, Nick Robinson is still kind of tight. His character, like, it hasn't lightened up yet, and from what I understand, later in the season, the consequences of an affair of this nature are explored, and the affair itself is almost like the framing for most of the season, not so much dominating the whole season. So I like to see more of that. And Nick Robinson, this probably is one of his first kind of forays into more adult themes. He's still playing a young person, but um, looking forward to that. I feel like I know what I'm gonna get from Kate Mara in this, and that's fine. I think she's well cast, but um, thematically, I'm just skeptical of like what the show's going to try and achieve, because when you have attractive leads that have chemistry and are giving good performances, if it's around subject matter that's hard to get behind, it can leave you wanting. Kind of reminds me of how I felt about I Know This Much Is True, and it's like all the window dressing kind of just is going to shape how you feel about what's happening, what you're seeing, you know. So definitely want to see more, but I think for a first episode, it's solid. I don't know if like the hook's super great though, because it's kind of slow played in that first episode.
We'll be checking back in with the show as the season winds down, but we're gonna now do exactly that. Check in with the show that we reviewed the first episode, which is "We Are Who We Are" on HBO, the Luca Guadagnino, Guadagnino, yeah, I think I said that right, miniseries, which wrapped up actually last week. We're reviewing it a week late because we've had things going on in our lives, but I found this show to be almost exactly kind of what I thought it was going to be, which is not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it like properly met my expectations, which I think were be to be very visually like stunning and pleasant to look at, to explore these themes, but maybe not really give a perspective, like a very strong perspective one way or the other, just kind of to explore them and let the viewer make their opinions of it. And got really strong performances, not only from the adults, but also these teenagers killed it. I really thought the acting in this was strong. So overall, I thought it was well done. I mean, it's Luca, so to be expected, but I'm wondering if you're on the same page with me on this.
I definitely think it's well done. I think we talked about this at the premiere episode, but like when you have Luca's sensibilities as the sole creative force really around the show, and he had some buddies helping him write, but like he's really framing everything about the show. That comes with expectations. I think he delivers on them, like you said. It's kind of that vibe that you expect from his stuff. This kind of whimsical, melancholy nature around young people coming of age, and he achieves that quite well. I think the locations are good, and you get a lot of good performances from young performers, relatively new performers. But it also had what I feared when I saw the first episode, was that I had a hard time connecting with our lead performance, Jack Dylan Grazer as Frasier. And that definitely framed a lot of my thoughts around the season. But because it's Luca, and because it's not this grand sweeping thematic treatise, it's really vibey, and like you said, it's kind of by design more open-ended and non-declarative about things, whether that's obvious things like gender identity or just what you should take away from what happens to certain characters. It was all quite intentional, so I respect that, but I had a hard time connecting with stuff. So for me, it was more episode to episode, whether I was having like the best time or just kind of enjoying with the technical stuff.
The episodes kind of almost are staggered that way, right? Like it feels like you would have one episode where it's like an excursion, something fun or light is happening. They're on the beach, they're going to a house and throwing a party after a wedding, like they're going to a concert. Like there's kind of those episodes, and then there's like the heavier stuff episodes, and in those other episodes, I think the heavier stuff is always like an underlying part, and like something that's kind of the subtext to the situations. But you can definitely, I think, find some of these episodes more enjoyable than others. And I agree with you though on Jack Dylan Grazer's performance as Frasier. I think I'm not sure if that was intentionally supposed to be difficult to connect with, because it seems like this is a person who just has difficulty connecting with people in general, or if this was something about the way it was played by the actor that made it hard. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good performance because I actually think it's intentional. I think that's what they're going for.
Yeah.
But to me, this grating personality from a really neurotic, immature, impulsive person is just not pleasant to be around when it's your lead performance. Like the whole, like I don't like it when the lead is like the chaotic good, chaotic evil of it all. I prefer when that's a character interacting with our main protagonist.
Mhm.
So it was very much up and down for me, just like the way the character's mood seemed to be up and down, scene to scene. Um, and I think maybe younger people might connect with it more. Like because like the coming of age, the acceptance of one's identity might be something people can latch onto in watching it. But I just had a hard time sympathizing with what Frasier was up to because he just seemed like a prick more often than not. Like it's simple as that. So that definitely got in the way for me, because I think the costume department did good. He's definitely well dressed as a teenager who really likes high fashion, like, and
Mhm.
like I think the line readings are good. Like like when he's like talking really fast or getting really animated. Like I think Razor did a pretty good job, but it was pretty grating, and I think it was probably by design.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if you're supposed to be like connecting or with the experience of anybody, you probably connect more with the group of kids who don't like Fraser, right? The group who wants Caitlin to come and spend time with them, and not the other, because they see Fraser as grading. They feel like, as one person says, he doesn't know how to love, and I think they do a good job of explaining maybe why some of these behaviors and these ways of relating come about for Fraser, as you see how dysfunctional his home life is, and not only the how both of his parents seem to be going out and having affairs, but um, how he's moved from place to place based on this his mom's ascension through the army into a commanding role. How his mom looks at the world and treats boundaries and norms and relationships with his friends. It's all very muddied and muddled, and he's this like extremely like guarded person by using his weirdness. I do think it's a good performance, but I agree it's hard to connect with an actor like that. Did you find yourself connecting with Caitlin, played by Jordan Christine Simon?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a more well-rounded character. Has I think just better payoff throughout the season. You know, because she has more relationships, right? Like she has a relationship with her dad,
Yep.
played by Kid Cudi, her brother,
Mm-hmm.
Frasier, the other kids, love interests, right? There's a lot to her story, and I think I definitely understood and liked the narrative arc of her relationship with Kid Cudi versus Frasier's relationship with his mom, Chloe Sevigny, and his mom's wife. Like I played by Alice Braga. Like I didn't connect with that one nearly as much.
Yeah, I think also Caitlin's journey feels so much more fulfilling and rewarding. The last episode, um, you're kind of so they're at this for those that didn't watch but want to know what happened. They go to this Blood Orange concert, which Blood Orange is kind of like a running theme throughout
Yeah,
the season. Obviously, Dev Hynes scored the
yeah,
season.
super meta.
Yeah, incredibly meta.
Yo, Dev
And
Hynes, bro, he's a genius.
I know, right? A little heavy-handed there, but um, it it ends up where Fraser goes off with this person he met on the train very impulsively and leaves Caitlin behind, and Caitlin ends up having feeling like she needs to leave the concert based on something that happens with another person there that she starts hooking up with, and Fraser isn't there. Like they're separated when this was like their big like last moment together. And I just found myself so angry at Fraser and just like wanting him to like come and comfort Caitlin and like not be so selfish. I think that's the difference. Kind of what you're talking about is it's hard to root for somebody who acts the way Fraser does, but Caitlin is kind of like that like goodness to the show. That person who's there for everybody, who even in someone like Fraser who's grading and hard can see the bright spots and connect with them. I think uh, Caitlin's journey as well with her gender identity, sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
is by far the most interesting exploration of that throughout the season. And you see quite a bit of sexual fluidity in the season, but the gender fluidity is pretty much strictly through Caitlin's experience. I thought that was really well done, and not like, you mentioned the Dev Hines thing being heavy handed. I thought they did that with a lot of tact, not necessarily like um, building it up too quickly, but allowing Caitlin to explore it, but then also feel fear and anxiety around it. I thought it was really well portrayed. How did you feel about that aspect of the show?
I think it's well done. That's probably the best, probably the lasting impact of the show thematically.
Mhm.
And I think it's played with a lot of tact because over the course of an 8 episode season, it comes up slowly but steadily. Like I think it's done well.
Yeah. Cuddy, how did he do?
Cuddy, I thought he was convincing as a kind of shitty dad. You know, like you because you understand, like it's subtle, but you understand it, right? Like he's a conservative black man, and his relationship with a daughter who doesn't align with that makes a lot of sense. I think Cuddy sold it
Hmm.
pretty well. But he's not like a
Yeah,
top. He's not like a top tier actor. It's kind of still stunt casting at the end of the day, like watching Kid Cudi be like an actor. He's getting cast in a lot of stuff. He's really like just Hollywood at this point.
mhm.
But like you could do better than Kid Cudi when it comes to these roles. But I think he's convincing enough.
Yeah, and I actually thought, especially because he's supposed to be this like overarching like control of like his family, while he has a son who um isn't doesn't really believe that that's his dad, and it feels like a part of his identity as a Muslim is being um, you know, uh, held down based on the expectations of his family.
Yeah.
He has his wife is obviously unhappy, doesn't know who she is, and exploring herself and her sexuality with the neighbor. Like there's a lot, fraying at the seams under him, and when it all comes to a head after the son's friend dies in a convoy explosion. I thought that scene was like made total sense. The plotting of the show just made sense the whole time, which was really nice. And you got allowed Cuddy to just be drunk and ridiculous, which is kind of cool.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to shout out episode 4. That's the
Yeah.
one where they go to the pool. They have that wedding. Like it represented a lot of things I like dislike about the show, because you have these really impulsive childlike decisions, right? This like uh turn of the moment engagement wedding, right?
Mhm.
But then you have all these kids being really reckless, being very much kids, and just kind of acting a fool at this not abandoned, empty, you know, like mini mansion,
Mansion.
right? And in
Yep.
the process, you get like rapid like sensory overload. You get a lot of Luca did this throughout the season. We get a lot of those like still shots where he pauses the frame for a few seconds,
Yep.
which is kind of an interesting touch because he would do it at precise moments. A lot of these quick cuts too, where it's like I think of like when it's all blue and they're like all slow dancing when they're like barely coherent at that point, and then it cuts again and it's like different people dancing. It's like a lot of like flourishes with the
Hmm.
camera, and I don't know, like that, like when they're all like getting fucked up and like getting touchy feely and all that. I was like, wow, this is like kind of like the pure it of the show, and that's where I couldn't look away. I was like, this is something, you know, and like uh, Jack Dylan Grazer's kind of hilarious when he's just playing Frasier fucked up. He's like barely able to walk and stuff. It's like that kind of like stuff. It's definitely lower stakes than the more serious subject matter that happens later in the season. But that episode
Yeah.
in particular definitely stood out to me just for being unlike a lot of things I saw this year.
Well, and I don't know if it's right to necessarily frame this in the shadow of Call Me by Your Name, but we talked about the similarities that were there when the season started, and I think it brings you back to Elio, and I'm forgetting the other one's name. I'm sorry, but riding through the
Army Hammer, we call him.
yes, Army Hammer, riding through the countryside, laying underneath the tree, like reading books, going to that club and dancing. Like it brings you to all those things you really love about Call Me by Your Name, that kind of create that world and make it a fun world to be in. Obviously, having a much stronger, I think, love story at the center of it. Um, and that kind of brings me to one last question I had, which is, how did you feel about how the show ended, which is Fraser and Caitlin finally come together and kiss at the end, when that's kind of been like a running like will they won't they through the season. Did you find that to be a satisfying ending? Did you feel earned? Do you feel it was earned?
Yeah, I think it's earned enough. I guess there's a logical endpoint. I'm fine with it. I did see Lucas say that him and his co-writers have made a Bible for a season 2 due to quarantine and having time to do exactly that. It has not been renewed by HBO at this time, but I actually kind of like it as is. Like I feel like it for what it was going for, I think it kind of wrapped up well. I don't know if there's a lot to gain by going back to the well, but maybe bigger fans of the show than mine would disagree.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily want to see more of it, especially because it seems like Caitlin and Fraser are going to be in different areas, and maybe something about them coming back together will be the through line. But I want to see Luca doing different stuff, exploring other things. But whatever he wants to do, really, I think will come out great. So we are who we are. I think I would consider this a success for HBO. Definitely something I've recommended to a few people in my life. So check it out if you haven't. And also check out Proxima, the Alice Wincour film, dropped last year, a hit video on demand just recently, starring Eva Green and Matt Dillon. Those are probably the two big names, I guess. Mm-hmm. And this is a it's sitting at like 81% Rotten Tomatoes. And after it ended last night, I found myself just being like, this was really not at all what I thought it was going to be. And it's funny because I think we've watched a lot of space movies in the last, I don't know, decade, I guess. That feels like a ton of them. Yeah. And almost all of them are focused on what happens out there. And this is very much a story about everything but space, where space is really just like the final end point. Pretty interesting. How did you feel watching Proxima, and just kind of about what you were expecting versus what you got?
Yeah, to that point, it has a lot of the DNA of another French film, a film from a French director, High Life, as well as even stuff like First Man Ad Astra, where it's really, the movie is really more concerned about the psychological aspects of space on its characters. Now, those three movies still happen in space. Proxima's even taking a step further, as you said. And it's funny to watch this now, given the year we're watching this, because space TV is big right now. Avenue 5, Space Force, For All Mankind, the debut show on Apple TV Plus, Away, the Netflix show with Hilary Swank, The Right Stuff on Disney Plus, Moonbase 8 on Showtime just came out. Right? There's a lot of these space shows, most of them comedies, most of them not very well received. And yet you get this movie Proxima, which is coming to us late. Like this played in France about a year ago, right? Like this already was nominated at the Caesar Awards, the French Oscars, in early 2020. Eva Green was nominated for Best Actress. Like this is old news to Europe, but to us, it's like, oh wow, more space things, cool. And definitely my favorite space thing of all the things I just mentioned. As a big fan of First Man, I quite enjoy Proxima because I like seeing that psychological stuff. And in this one, I think like because it's really specific about like connecting with your family and how you will lose that connection when you literally leave the planet for a year, right? Like it's a simple problem, but seeing it played out, I think is pretty effective. And like I think it's a simple line, almost a predictable line, kind of late in the movie, where it's like the hard part isn't leaving, the hard part's coming back because time keeps going, or something along those lines. And I'm like, wow, yeah, again, a simple premise, but I think it's done pretty well in this. The movie was shot on location at Star City in Moscow and the European Space Agency in Cologne. So it really is convincing as a modern day movie about astronauts. And Eva Green's performance, I think, really sells the kind of quiet conflict that something like this has, and how actually really plausible something like this is, you know. So I liked it a lot.
Yeah, the shooting on location, I think, really added an element to it because there's that scene, I think, when they like walk up to like the back end of a rocket, and it, like, actually just it's just a real rocket, and I was like, this is like one of the most convincing sets I've ever seen. Like, this is unbelievable. And then I saw that they shot on location and made more sense, but it looks great. It feels hyper realistic. And you mentioned all those space movies. I think the one it comes back to most for me is actually like the first like 40 minutes of Interstellar,
Sure. Yeah,
before
same thing.
Matthew McConaughey goes into space. Yep, and it's all him and his little girl, and like what's gonna be like when he goes up there. And I think that this obviously portrays it in a much more realistic way, and it kind of walks you through a lot of the things that you might not really think about that these people have to plan for and go through, especially being a single mom, or I guess not a single mom necessarily, but like a divorced parent who takes care of their child as the primary caregiver. That's a whole nother challenge. And balancing the sacrifice that you make to be a parent with chasing your own dreams and goals, I thought was an interesting question at the center of this. And you mentioned that like quiet conflict Eva Green has, is she's kind of propelled forward by Matt Dillon's like asshole astronaut, like,
Yeah.
giving her little barbs in the side and pushing her forward. You kind of just see it like growing and growing until it finally starts to like break down closer to the end of the movie. I thought it was a really great performance from her. What was the last thing you saw her in, Eva Green?
I was thinking about that too. I think her biggest stuff of late was probably Penny Dreadful, the show. I haven't watched that, but I mean, to me, the biggest Eva Green thing is still more or less the first
Bond.
Eva Green thing, which would be Casino Royale, Vesper Lynd,
Yeah.
classic
Yeah.
Bond girl.
I thought out of those four, she was probably my favorite one too. She's really great in that role, and she's great in this role as well. I'm wondering for you, what were like the moments that you look to and you're like, that was like what made this movie what it was? Are there any like particular scenes or moments?
I think the Matt Dillon character, at least the way it's set up early on, it is really effective because it's initially like just kind of like blatant misogyny in the workplace, but then also like kind of like the belittling stuff where it's like this very well could be a well-intentioned, more or less good person, but this is again the kind of stuff that women face in certain competitive fields, right? Like it felt very accurate, unfortunately. I actually, upon reflection, think that he kind of comes around in the film in terms of his relationship with Eva Green, Sarah. That seemed to be kind of quick. Like they never had a reckoning, right? Like he just seemed to respect her more, I guess, as she proved herself in training. Like that maybe seemed a little quick to me or kind of glossed over. But yeah, I mean, I think just kind of the mood you get from the locations throughout really sells it. And those scenes with the daughter are throughout are really good because of the writing. The like Stella,
Yeah.
she says some like really pointed, almost morbid things early on to her mom, like, "Are you gonna die before me?" Right? And like,
Yeah.
and you understand this like disassociation that's happening between the mother and the child, and like just kind of seeing that happen and completely understanding why it's happening. Those are the things that I think sell it to me the most. And I think this is kind of like the one of the best examples of like, again, stuff like this. You don't actually go to space, but you do this well, and it's really effective. I think there was that there was that one season of that other show, I think a year and a half ago, the Sean Penn Hulu show, The First, kind of a similar thing where it's almost like more about the melodrama of preparing to leave Earth, and that show is about going to Mars. But from what I understand about it, Proxima is much more effective in actually selling that, and I think part of that's because it's really small scale, but for what it's going for, I think it's really well done. I think the writing is like sneakily like really effective. And Alice Winnicor did actually co-write Mustang, which was the French Best Foreign Language Film nominee in 2015. So there is a bit of pedigree with this film.
Yeah, Alice Winnicott seems like a bit of a rising star, so definitely someone I think we'll be hearing more from. And I agree. I think the scenes, especially like when the little girl like runs away, right, and they kind of chase her down, and they scream at or yelling at each other like, "You scared me," and like, I forgot what the little girl said back, but it's like really cutting, and you're just like, the the amount that like it's been building silently in both of these two, and especially like through the phone calls, you can kind of hear it in their like tone really
When she
well.
won't speak French back to her, she's only speaking German
Yeah.
instead. The language of
Yep.
her dad. Like,
All
oh,
the like passive aggressiveness.
yeah.
Yep. Finally like coming to the surface is just really strong. And this did have like a very like sweet ending to it. And I also loved how they kind of tied in like the real life female astronauts who are mothers who have also gone through this, and this movie is dedicated to them. So just I thought overall a really great watch, and probably an under the radar film for Americans, but I'm hoping people find it for sure.
Yeah. Looking back on the 2020 Caesar Awards, Eva Green was nominated for Best Actress alongside both Adele Hanel and Naomi Merlant from Portugal Lady on Fire. None of the three actually won the award. It was won by Aeneas Demostier in Alice and the Mayor, a movie I haven't seen. But,
Was that the one where they all like walked out because of Ronan Farrow?
That did happen at that awards. Yes, I
Yeah, I
don't
was
know
gonna say.
in what it was relation to. I don't remember, but it was about something. Oh, it was about
Yeah.
Roman Polanski winning Best Director.
Ronan Farrow, Roman Polanski, Ronan Farrow, good guy. Roman Polanski,
Ronan
not
Farrow,
so good.
very connected to the Woody Allen scandal. That's what
Yes. And
Hollywood people easy to get confused.
Any last thoughts? Proxima, watch it, VOD it.
VOD it, man. Normal rental price. Check it out. It's definitely low radar here in America.
Yes.
Considering it's been a long time for it finally coming here. I'm not actually sure why it took this long to come to us, but the reverse happens to people or outside the world, so we're not allowed to complain about that.
Especially with the holidays coming up, folks, you're going to be maybe with people. I don't know if with COVID that's going to be something a lot of people are doing, but if you want to have a movie, you can really sound like you know what you're talking about with recommendation. This is a pretty good one, so check it out. But Dave, what else should the people be taking in so that they can hear our takes on it, our fiery takes?
Yeah, so next week we don't have a whole lot on the dock yet. That obviously will change, but some more VOD movies. I think the next Personal History of David Copperfield finally on VOD. That's exciting because that movie's very well liked. Maybe we'll talk some Grammy nominations predictions. I know you're very excited about the return of His Dark Materials season 2. We won't be talking about that because neither of us finished the first season. The Crown's also coming back for season 4, but not a show I've seen yet, so we won't be talking about that one either. Speaking of shitty Hollywood, the new Woody Allen movie, A Rainy Day in New York, is finally out in the U.S. That's the one with Timothy Chalamet and Selena Gomez. It's apparently very bad. You can watch that if you want. So we'll be talking about some stuff. We'll figure it out.
We got some stuff. Again, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod, and Best of 2020, Nostalgia Pod Best of 2020 on Spotify. Give it a follow.